Assalamu alaikum. Zahra here with our next episode of Spiritual Lessons from Harry Potter. So we are in the Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 7. And if you're new here, I am a spiritual coach who supports mainly Muslims on connecting deeper with Allah so that they can experience a life of more abundance, peace, love, whatever a happy, whole, healthy life looks and means for you. That's what I help you to achieve. And I am doing this series using the books Harry Potter because we learn so well through stories, because it helps us remember. The story part helps us remember the lesson, and then the lesson embedded in a story teaches us how to apply it in our own lives. So through Harry Potter, we have been learning a lot, and if you're new here, I highly recommend going back and listening from the beginning. Even if you've never read the books before, you'll learn a lot, and you will be encouraged to read the books because they're so fun. Okay, so we're on chapter 7, and now school has started. Harry has met Professor Lockhart, and he's spending now a lot of time avoiding him because he sees that he's constantly trying to project Harry wanting to like be attention seeking and getting fame. And then in this chapter, it starts out with Oliver Wood, which is the Quidditch captain. I love all the hearts. Hi, guys. Which is the Quidditch captain, waking up Harry extra early for Quidditch practice. And this is because, I'm going to read you what's going on here. So he's woken them up super early in the morning. It makes it sound like maybe 6 a.m. And he's like, "Listen here, you lot," he said, glowering at them all. "We should have won the Quidditch Cup last year. We're easily the best team, but unfortunately, owing to circumstances beyond our control..." Harry shifted guiltily in his seat. He had been unconscious in the hospital wing for the final match of the previous year, meaning that Gryffindor had been a player short and had suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. Wood took a moment to regain control of himself. Their last defeat was still clearly torturing him. So this year, we train harder than ever before. Okay, so this lesson here. So they won they lost the previous Quidditch match and the whole tournament because of circumstances outside of their control, right? They couldn't help it that Harry was unconscious and couldn't play. But what's the response? The response is to work harder, to try harder. So here we know that everything in this life is a combination of, or the results that we see in our life are a combination of trusting in Allah and tying our camel, right? The famous hadith, tie your camel and trust in Allah. Our work plus our faith and trust in Allah, and Allah facilitates everything. Nothing can happen without Allah's will, right? So here, they have lost a game. Circumstances outside of their control. They were prepared, they had trained, they had done all the work, they had tied their camel. And then, outside of their control, they lost the match and the whole tournament. And the response now is to tie the camel tighter and harder, right? In a way that is kind of torturing Oliver Wood, right? He's so determined, he's so desiring, he so wants to win this year that he's like, I am not going to let anything get in my way, and I'm going to take even more control of these circumstances. We're going to train extra early in the morning and all of this stuff. So the lesson here is that this response is harmful. You're putting yourself in too much stress and pressure to try and control things that you have no control over. Following, right? So it's good to want to practice as much as you can, and in whatever it is that you're doing or working on your business or in your studies at school. But when something happens that's outside of your control, to allow yourself to have that grace and understanding that you are only a piece of the equation. There's another part of your equation, and that is Allah's will. And so to know and believe that whatever happened was for the best for you, and to continue to make your best effort to tie your camel, but without letting it make you become obsessive and try to control things that are not within your realm, or to lose hope and trust in Allah that He is not supporting you. You don't know the wisdom behind why things unfolded the way they did. Okay, moving on. So they are practicing on the Quidditch field, and Oliver has reserved the time so early in the morning, and then they see the Slytherins coming on to the Quidditch pitch. And they're like, what are you guys doing here? We reserved it. This is our time. And the Slytherins are like, oh, we have special permission because we need to train our new Seeker. And who's their new Seeker? Their new Seeker is Malfoy. So both teams are now like standing off at each other. And then the Slytherins also are showing off. Well, speaking of our new Seeker, look what Malfoy's father, right, Lucius Malfoy, has gifted all of us. The latest new broomstick. So they all have these brand new, latest model broomstick. And then they begin teasing the Weasleys about how poor they are and the poor broomsticks that they have. And then Hermione and Ron also come onto the field, and Hermione says, well, at least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way onto the team. They got in on pure talent. So obviously this is a dig at Malfoy. He's the new Seeker. His dad bought them all brooms. You bought your way onto the team. And Malfoy responds, no one asked you for your opinion, you filthy little mudblood. He spat. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad because there was an instant uproar at his words. Okay, so now everyone begins to fight because Malfoy has used this slur, which we already talked about in a previous episode. It's basically a racial slur. You know, the racism between magical folks is, are you a pure blood, or are you a half blood, or are you muggle born? And the slur for that is to be a mudblood, right? That your blood is right, not clean, you're dirty, all of those things. And so the Gryffindor team are all trying to defend Hermione, and they're attacking the Slytherins, and the Slytherins are trying to protect Lucius. Oh my God, protect Malfoy from being beat up. Okay. And this, we already had been introduced to this magical hierarchy in the beginning. So now it's the first time that Hermione is hearing about it. She doesn't know what it means. They go over to Hagrid's hut, and he also explains it to them, and they get that deeper understanding of what's going on here. Okay, so we're gonna touch on this later, as I already said, right? Okay, well, here, I'll touch on it now. I'll touch on it now. As with races, ethnicities, you know, whatever, we are all the same. We are all the same. There are differences between us in skin color, in height, in intelligence, in looks. There are differences between us, but we are all fundamentally the same, and we all fundamentally come from the same source. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us all. So the reason for our differences, right? Allah tells us in the Quran, right? I created you different nations and tribes so that you may know one another. And in that knowing of one another, we will come to see that, like, oh, we're all just trying to, like, you know, do what's right, take care of our families, make a contribution in the world, experience some joy and peace, right? We all fundamentally want the same thing. If you cut us, we all bleed. And so this looking past, looking beyond, you know, the superficial differences, and seeing the truth of us. And it is a trick of the shaitan, right? It's the first sin of the shaitan, right, was to distinguish himself as being better from mankind, because of his form. I'm made from smokeless fire, and you've made these creatures from clay. Clearly, smokeless fire is better, so I'm a better being. It's the birth of the arrogance all around that thing. And so it is a trick of the shaitan for us to be like, well, I'm better than this, or this person is not as good as me because they're from this country or from this place, or they look this way, or they don't have this type of blood, this lineage, this hierarchy, whatever. It is all to divide us unnecessarily. There is no division. We don't need to be divided. We are all one. Okay, so J.K. Rowling is introducing this concept into this magical world because this concept gets introduced into every story. The concept that I am somehow different, better, superior, inferior than someone else gets introduced. Like, we just automatically look for what are our differences instead of really holding on to and grounding ourselves in what are our similarities. Okay, so then the kids go over to Hagrid's hut because in this altercation, Ron's spell backfired and he's coughing up slugs. And when they get to Hagrid's hut, Lockhart has just left. And we get the impression that Lockhart has been giving Hagrid advice on something. He's been giving me advice on getting kelpies out of the well, he growled Hagrid, moving a half-plucked rooster off his scrub table and setting down a teapot. Like I don't know, and banging on about some banshee he banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle. So here again is the growing sense that Lockhart's story is not adding up, right? He's written 7 books talking about all of his adventures, all the things he's done, and people have read them, and he's gained fame and popularity. But now people, when they are interacting with him, they're like, something's not adding up, right? And Hagrid, who has a lot of respect for professors, is like, if this is true, right, I'll eat my kettle. And Hermione kind of gets offended at that, right? And again here, that same point, Hermione is a brilliant girl. Hermione is a brilliant girl. And this issue happens a lot with people in love as well, right? That you are smart, you are talented, whatever, and then like when it comes to love, somehow all of that intelligence doesn't translate in the way that it needs to. So Hermione, it's not like she's missing the signs and can't see things. But as we talked about before, what happens is that you get attached to the story. So the story she made, the story she's read about what Lockhart's done, she's like, I love it, this is amazing. And so too and now I'm kind of speaking for women, towards women, you can meet someone like, oh my God, and his family's from here, and he has this, and he does this job, and you just build the story, and you're like in love with the story of what it could be, and how you could work together, and how your lives could be, even when things are poking at the story of like, well, that doesn't sound right, and this doesn't sound true, and this seems like a red flag, but you're so attached to the story, you've already built up the story in your head, and you want it to be true. I just want it to be true, so I'm gonna overlook, ignore, make excuses for all these things so that somehow I can hold on to the story, and if I want it enough, all of those things that are showing me that it's incorrect will fall away, or everyone else is actually wrong, or whatever. So it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence, because this trap can happen to intelligent people. It has everything to do with allowing yourself to not go into fantasy land. I don't know another way to say it. I'll think of another way to say it, but that's the basic. Don't let yourself fall into fantasy land. Stay grounded in reality. Okay. We already talked about that. Now. All right, so later they run into Professor McGonagall, and she reminds them that their detention for flying the car into the tree is tonight for Ron and Harry. And Ron is going to have detention with the caretaker and be cleaning the trophy room, cleaning trophies in the trophy room. and Harry is going to have detention with Professor Lockhart answering his fan mail. And both of them are like really annoyed and upset with their detention, and both of them wish to have the other person's detention. And this point here is just like how we all like romanticize the other side. The grass is always greener on the other side. But not only that, right? The detention that they each had is like perfectly a perfect punishment for each of them, in that it triggers on the things that they don't want, right? And so sometimes, I'm going to use this example in a different way, but sometimes we see other people's lives, especially here on Instagram and in other places, and you're like, oh, I want what they have, I want that business they have, or that family they have, or this, relationship that they have. But you may not want also the hardship that they have, right? The hardship that they have could be much more uncomfortable for you than it is for them, and vice versa. So you have to take, right, the whole package. You cannot just pinpoint, right? The reason why, Harry being with Lockhart is so annoying and triggering for him is because of his whole background and what he's been through. So Ron can't just be like, oh, I want to, go to detention with Professor Lockhart without having the whole experience of why that is a punishment for Harry. I hope this makes sense. That sometimes when we are looking at other people's lives and being like, well, at least if I had that, I could handle it. Yeah, that's true. You could handle that thing that you're looking at. I want that test. I want that challenge. I want that hardship. But you don't know about the other things that they have, or you don't fully appreciate the other things that they have that you would not want. You would not want those other things, right? You would not want those other things. Sure, you think you can handle this test, but you couldn't handle whatever else that they have. So to just keep that balance in mind and know that your life is perfectly designed and set up for you to be successful, for you to grow, for you to heal, for you to learn the good, the quote unquote good and the bad of it, the hard and the easy of it is perfectly designed for you. So you don't need to be looking left or right at what other people have. You can just stay focused on you. Okay. Then Harry is at his detention with Lockhart, and he hears a voice. He hears a voice saying, come to me, let me rip you, let me tear you, let me kill you. And Lockhart doesn't hear it. And then he goes and he tells Ron, and Ron's like, that's really weird. And it's something unusual, even for a wizard, to hear voices that no one can hear. And they're like, even if he was invisible, we would have heard the door open. So there's a mystery around there. So that ends chapter 7. Then we begin chapter 8, which is called the Death Day Party. And in this chapter, we have nearly headless Nick, who is a ghost, who invites Harry to his Death Day party. And he's celebrating his 500 years of the day that he died. And the reason that he invites Harry to this party is that he is feeling down. He's applied to be part of the, what is it called? The Headless Hunt. And they've rejected him because Nick is nearly headless. He was almost decapitated, but a portion of his skin was not cut all the way through, so his head is not fully severed from his body. And the Headless Hunt are like, we can't accept you. You can't do all of the things that we're going to do in this Headless Hunt. We're going to juggle our heads. We're going to do all these things. And so since you're nearly headless and not fully headless, you cannot participate. And this part with nearly headless Nick just made me reflect on how we'll always find something. We'll always find some way to make us feel insecure, right? There'll always be something that can trigger our insecurity, right? He could have looked for a group of other nearly headless people. I'm sure there's some of them. But instead, he's fixated on this group of headless people, thinking that they're cooler, they're better, whatever it is, and that he wants to be a part of them. And since he can't, it's making him feel down. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to invite, the famous Harry Potter to my death day party. And he says you can bring Ron and Hermione, and these will be like the only living people at his death day party, which is, something interesting, something cool, that like living people came to your death day party. Okay. And what happened here? Okay, then at the death day party, there's a whole bunch of ghosts, and we're introduced to, they call her Moaning Myrtle. And Hermione's telling Ron and Harry, like, oh my gosh, like, or she sees Moaning Myrtle, and she's like, I don't want, let's move her here. I don't want her to see me because, she's so miserable. She's always moaning. She's like always crying, and wailing and she haunts the girls' restroom. And it's so hard to go to the bathroom with this ghost whining and crying there. But Peeves, who is, this poltergeist troublemaker at the school, calls over Moaning Myrtle, and he tells Moaning Myrtle, like, oh, Hermione was just talking about you. And Myrtle eyed Hermione suspiciously. You're making fun of me, she said, silver tears welling rapidly in her small see-through eyes. No, honestly, didn't I just say how nice Myrtle was looking? Oh, said Hermione, nudging Harry and Ron in the ribs. Oh yeah, she did. Don't lie to me, Myrtle grasped, tears flowing down her face while Peeve chuckled happily over her shoulder. Don't you think I know what people call me behind my back? Fat Myrtle, ugly Myrtle, miserable, moaning, moping Myrtle. And this point here is, okay, so first of all, I talk a lot about your ability to take a compliment, right? In my coaching practice. Are you able to take a compliment? How do you feel when someone gives you a compliment? How do you receive someone's compliment? Right, so initially, when Hermione first sees Moaning Myrtle, she's like, no, I was saying how nice you looked. And Myrtle is like, no, like, this is not true. You are, she's looking at her suspiciously. There's something else going on here, right? She does not want to receive a compliment. People call me these things. You must have been calling me these things too. And she begins to act in a way that is why people call her those things. And it just illustrates the self-fulfilling prophecy that we all fall into. What we believe and how we perceive other people to be is how they will be. Because we will also end up projecting ourselves in that way. So if you have a belief, people think I am ugly, or people don't like me, or people think I'm naive, or I'm silly, or I'm dumb, or whatever your belief is. If you have this belief, and I'm not talking even like, consciously, it could be like deep, like a childhood wound, like when you were a kid, people, made fun of you and called you those things. So in the back of your mind, you're always a little bit worried, like, oh, do they not like me? Or do they think I'm silly? Or do they think I'm naive? Or whatever that thing is. Because you believe that, you will be looking for people to respond to you in that way. And you will notice any indication of something that they are, which in turn is going to support your belief, which is going to feed into you behaving or operating in that way. And again, here, you may feel like you are trying so hard to operate opposite of what you think. Okay, people think, I'm not smart. So I'm going to try really hard to like show how intelligent I am, and, however that expresses for you. But in your effort to do that, because it's from a place of insecurity, you'll probably end up making mistakes or saying something wrong or tripping over your words or whatever. That's going to perpetuate you looking not as intelligent as you want to look, and then you will feel that you're like, oh my god, they think I'm so dumb, and then you will think you're so dumb, and then it keeps going. So the only way to break out of this cycle, it's actually kind of challenging. It's more than I can say in just a little short video. It's part of what I do in my coaching program. So if you're interested in like breaking out of these cycles, reach out to me about coaching. But the only way to change out of that cycle is to change how you see yourself, change how you view yourself, change your belief about what you believe about yourself. Because once you believe something different, then you will begin to operate something in a different way. Then you will see people responding to you in a different way, and will solidify your new belief, right? You've got to flip the script, as they say. Yes. And this Death Day chapter is very fun. Talking about the life. It makes you reflecting on life, living, death, and all of that. But that is where we'll end off, and then we are going to, oh, and Harry also hears the voices in the walls again, which is going to become more salient as we move forward. But otherwise, thank you for joining me for another episode of Spiritual Lessons from Harry Potter, and inshallah, I will be back with the next episode soon. And if anyone, I didn't see any questions, but if you have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments, and I will try and get to them, and also while I'm live. All right. Assalamu alaikum.